Look at
how savvy you are.
Judo,
Look
we
at
have,
that.
Other students,
Huh?
Ethan and Eli, who are demonstrating, and Evan demonstrate some Aikido techniques. Oh, in the corner.
And here we are. Well, welcome. Welcome to the Burns Valley Judo Club from Winona, Minnesota. I chose to do my action research project on the cooperative learning in the martial arts, which, if you're in education, another study on cooperative learning might seem a little mundane or, I've heard this before. But when it comes to cooperative learning in the martial arts, that is rare. Cooperative learning in the martial arts is the exception rather than the rule. Most martial arts schools are based on a competitive learning method. So I really learned a lot when I started changing my approach towards the martial arts. My name is Keith Polus, and I've been a teacher. In the high school setting, I've been a teacher for about 8 years. I teach speech and theater arts, and I was at the high school in the Wisconsin Dells. I taught for a year down in Houston, Minnesota. I taught speech and English, and I do have a BA in public speaking from Winona State. I graduated in 1978 with a public speaking degree, and then I went on to the University of Minnesota, and I have a BA in philosophy from the University of Minnesota. And then I also earned a BS degree in communication and theater arts from Winona State. So now what I've really discovered through this whole experience in our master's program, I really had my reservations when, Darren, when we first started. I think all of us had our reservations, particularly for how busy we were and all the things we had going on in our lives. And I really wasn't interested in another educational regurgitation experience. And we found out from the first weekend we met that, hey, this might be a pretty good program. So right away during our first year, I ran across this idea of cooperative learning. One of the students from the previous year, Mark Clausen, came and did a presentation. And I had been struggling for quite some time with my teaching methods in the martial arts. And I had frustrated students, and I had some things going on in the classroom, which in judo we refer to as the dojo. And I knew I needed a new approach. And when I was first introduced to this cooperative learning method, I knew right away this might be just what I needed to make my classroom and my dojo better. No matter what I'm teaching, no matter what class that I'm preparing for, I always try to establish goals for my students. I always try to get my students to really understand what is it that they're trying to accomplish. And that's true whether I'm teaching speech, whether I'm teaching theater, whether I'm working with forensics, I always try to get my students to understand what exactly is it that they're trying to accomplish. What are your goals for the year? Even as a coach, Darren, you know, what are your goals for the year? What do you really want the kids to focus on, and what do you want them to strive for? And these are some of the aspects that I think are important in all areas of study, but particular in the area of the martial arts. There's a fine line between diligent and disciplined. When you're asked, how would you define diligence and how would you define discipline, oftentimes they overlap. Diligent, to me, is getting your students to understand that no matter what, whether they feel like it or not, they need to stay on task. Oftentimes, we don't feel like staying on task. Oftentimes, we don't feel like being on the field. It might be raining. The weather might be cold. You know, there are a lot of factors that determine whether or not we're diligent. And regardless of how we feel, regardless of the weather, if you stick to it and accomplish what it is that you wanted to accomplish that day, to me that's diligent. A discipline study is somewhat like being diligent, but diligence is never quitting. Diligence is stick-to-itness. And a discipline study is also necessary, and discipline is more in the realm of being on time, getting your work done, always accomplishing what it is that you want to accomplish in class that day. And the two are really important. And another goal that we've established is we always want to have a commitment to excellence in everything that we say and do. Excellence is really, really important. We strive to accept challenges with determination and passion. If you don't have determination and you're not excited, you're not passionate about what you do, it makes the task that much more difficult. So those are some values and some characteristics that are really important when you're trying to establish what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And we at the Burns Valley Judo Club are really emphasize the fact that we attempt to do what is right even when no one else is looking. And that's really important for the development of character. We give our best inside and outside the dojo. Trust, honor, and respecting one another. The code of character should be first in our educational efforts. And without a code of character, I don't think anything really lasts. I don't think anything really carries with you through life. Because we as teachers, we're teaching much more than just information. And character building, I think, has to be a really important aspect in establishing what it is we're trying to accomplish. So the beginning of that journey, I really think, starts with yourself. You have to start with yourself. If you're going to change the world, the change has to start within you. If there's light in the person, if there's light in the person's soul, there's beauty in the person. If there's beauty in the person, there's harmony in the house. If there's harmony in the house, there will be order in the nation. And if there's order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. And if we as teachers can really understand that the journey really begins within the life of that student, that's where the change needs to start. Achievement starts with knowing oneself, and we really try to emphasize this in and outside the dojo. And I try to really ingrain this into the life of my students. A journey into yourself really begins with, there's a Zen concept, and it's called beginner's mind. And Shutaru Suzuki said in his book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, he said that in the mind of the beginner, the possibilities are endless. But in the mind of the expert, they are few. And when you think about that, when it comes to learning, you have to have a beginner's mind if you're ever going to learn anything. You really have to understand that the mental attitude that you're already an expert gives you the problem and the attitude that, well, I'm an expert and I already know everything. I already know it all. If that's your attitude, you're going to have a problem with any kind of learning, whether it be in the martial arts or the classroom or anything. So it's really important to have a beginner's mind, and I try to ingrain that into the lives of my students. In the martial arts, we have a concept that's called Budo. And Budo is really the spirit and the code of character. It's the heart of what the martial arts are all about. The Budo in the martial arts, I believe, cannot really be taught. I can teach technique, I can teach form, I can teach, play when it comes to understanding how something is accomplished, how do you throw a good pass, how do you make a good tackle, things like that. Those things can be taught. But when it comes to the character inside, the diligence that we just talked about earlier, the discipline that we just talked about, the being honest and trustworthy, being responsible, those are things that your students really have to strive after, and they have to want it within themselves. You can talk about it, but whether or not you can truly teach those aspects of character, that's a different question. But we try to ingrain it into the lives of our students, and we try to really emphasize the importance of striving after those characteristics and that code of character, because that's what's going to make us successful. But in order to become different from what we are, if we're not responsible, if we're not honest, if we're not trustworthy, we're not aware of that, we won't be able to change ourselves at all. Bruce Lee said to become different from what we are, we must have some awareness of what we are. So in the classroom, it's really important to bring your students to this point in their lives, where they have some awareness of the kind of person that they are. Because that's the only place change is going to begin. Change will start when they're aware of who they are and what they want to become. The place to improve the world is first in one's own heart. And I just shared that quote with you from Confucius, that if there's light in the soul, then there will be beauty in the person. And if there's beauty in the person, then there will be harmony in the house, and then in the nation, and then in the world. And it goes out from here, from one's own heart. And you know what? After you get this in order, after you establish this in your life, then you're going to realize that the only Zen you'll find on the mountain is the Zen that you bring. You have to already have it. You can't find it anywhere else. I once heard an old cowboy say, and it's in a movie, and Robert Duvall is sitting out in the prairie. He just got off his horse. They're around the campfire, and they're talking about going to California. And Robert Duvall makes the comment that, you know what? The coffee doesn't taste any different in California than it does in Minnesota. And that is so true, because the coffee tastes good wherever you are because of the thoughts and the impressions that you have of that coffee. And the competitive approach is usually the approach that you'll find in 95 or more, I don't know what the percentage is, but every martial arts studio that I've ever been in, the competitive approach is the method that they choose. It's the road taken by most martial arts schools. And Darren asked me earlier if this was my father. Or that was Mark.
I didn't. I knew
that was Mark.
I knew who that was.
You knew who that was.
I went to Owatonna State. I remember seeing Bryce all over.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is actually one of my instructors. He was a public speaking professor in the communications department at Owatonna State. and he announces the Winona State basketball games. He was announcing the football games probably when you were there, and he's pretty active on campus. And Sensei Wilkinson happened to be my first judo instructor. The competitive approach that I've been teaching since 1985 really was centered around a very, very competitive style. Grades were important, awards were important, trophies were important, having the best technique, having the best attitude, all of those things were really important. So I was working for years under this particular method, this particular program. Every year every week, my students had an opportunity to earn a letter grade. If they had really good technique that day, if their form was really sharp, if they had a really good attitude, they had a really good meditative posture during the time we spent in meditation. And then when we started, we always played a game called Shark Pit, where they competed against one another, and whoever was able to do a throw and actually throw the other person to the mat, they stayed in the shark pit, and the person that lost by being thrown, he had to leave the shark pit. And the person that stayed in the shark pit the longest, of course, got a letter grade that day. And everything was based on rewards. Everything was based on earning grades and trophies and things like that. And the student with the best attitude, not only at the dojo, but in their home and at school, if the parents reported to me that they were really, really helpful at home and they did things they were expected to do at home, their parents would report to me. And then the student with the most ease at the end of the year would earn the trophy for excellence in judo. And that was pretty much my approach. And in the competitive approach, I was discovering, each year that went by, I was discovering more and more problems with that approach to education. For one thing, students were only concerned with themselves. They wanted to be the best. They wanted to be on top. They wanted to earn that trophy at the end of every year. And they would do anything to get there and to accomplish that goal, to earn that trophy. And there was a lot of attitudes like if a student didn't think they really had a chance at winning that trophy, well, they would just give up. They wouldn't try anymore. And after a couple months into the program of each new year, if a student found himself or herself in that position, they would just give up. They wouldn't try. And for 3 years in a row, one of my students, his name is Eli, who you'll meet in a little bit, Eli won the trophy for 3 years in a row. And by the time that third year rolled along and Eli won the trophy again, students were beginning to feel very defeated. And this whole competitive approach with awards and trophies and letter grades, it can really wear on a student's self-esteem. It can really wear on a student's self-worth and whether or not they feel they can actually ever be a winner. And in this situation, you always have one winner and the rest are really, really considered losers. Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching about 2,000 years ago, had a very wise saying, and I applied this to my martial arts school last year. Not exalting the gifted prevents quarreling. And I discovered I had a lot of quarreling. I had a lot of students name-calling, and the reason all of that goes on is because they're not interested in helping one another. They're not cooperating with one another. There's no collaborative learning going on in the classroom at all because they're only concerned with being the winner. They're only concerned with being on top and nothing else really matters. This is Brian Erickson, and Brian is the grandfather of 3 of my students, Eli, Ethan, and Evan. And last year, when I chose to begin my pilot study, I did almost an entire year of a pilot study with cooperative learning in the martial arts. And then this year, I did the real study, and we made comparisons. And Brian brought Eli, Evan, and Ethan every week, every Wednesday, to judo. And he was able to see how they were acting, and then after I started the pilot study, the changes that were made.
Or to get a trophy. Well, they basically found that if, hey, there's no chance that I'm going to be able to win this award, well, there's no sense of me really trying hard. That was one of the downfalls with that program. I guess now with...
This is Todd and Kathy, one of my other students by the name of Thomas, and I chose to focus my pilot study on four of my students: Thomas, Ethan, Eli, and Evan. And the reason I chose those 4 students in particular is because they have been with my school the longest. They have been in the martial arts school for about 5 years, and I chose simply to focus on those 4 kids because they came to school every week, they were on time, and they were the most disciplined out of all of my students. And if other students didn't come and they weren't there, or they quit, or for some reason, it was really beneficial for me just to focus on these 4 students. This is Todd and Kathy, mother and father of Thomas, and they're going to tell you and talk a little bit about what the competitive approach was like for them. Whoops.
All right, today is April what?
17th.
Today is April 17th, and I'm with Todd and Kathy. They are the mother and the father of one of my students. His name is Thomas. And today we're going to talk about the old competitive program that we used to really emphasize competition, and our main focus in the dojo was competition. And we're going to talk about that old program, and I just want Todd and Kathy's perspective on the old competitive program versus the new program that I'm referring to as the cooperative learning program. And guys, I'm just going to ask you for your perspective. Talk about the old program first, and your perspective on that, and then we'll talk about the new program, and just get some ideas on how you feel about both. So, Todd or Kathy, whoever wants to start, go ahead and start sharing.
The old program, that was pretty rough on him. He struggled. He always, them E's were something, and when he didn't get it, he thought he was being picked on, and, he just struggled for a long time there. And every night it was a fight to get him to come. Sometimes, and we told him, no, I don't let him quit. That's my opinion. You keep going. If you start something, you don't quit.
I think he lost a lot of self-confidence not getting the E's.
Yeah.
I think it hurt him. I think he felt like he disappointed you. He disappointed us for it. Mm-hmm. And so he was afraid when he'd have to say he never got the E also. Mm-hmm. He felt like he was picked on a lot by the kids. They teased him. He didn't like that. He cried a lot. He didn't want to come to practices anymore. And so that's when I told him that he needs to talk to you about it. Mm-hmm. He needs to tell you how he felt with the way things were going in that.
This is Matt. Last year during the pilot study, Matt wasn't with us. He was deployed to Kuwait. He's in the military. So he was gone for an entire year. And the first individual you met by the name of Brian, that's Matt's father, a stepfather. And Brian was the one that brought Ethan, Eli, and Evan to judo every week. And this is Matt. He's back from Kuwait now. And this is his perspective on the old competitive program.
The old program, was a very competitive one, and if one kid wasn't very athletic, he'd always feel like he'd never achieve anything. He'd never win, he'd never leave with a good feeling. And it was always hard on the kids and always hard on me as a parent seeing that as well.
This is Ethan. This is one of Matt's sons. And as you can see, he started with me quite some time ago. I think this is his 5th year in judo. And this was Ethan. He had already been with me. He's a green belt here. So he had already been with me for almost a year when this picture was taken. This is Ethan today talking about the old competitive program.
And Eli won the trophy when we had the old competitive program for like 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
How did that feel?
It sucked for me and Evan and Thomas, I'm sure. Eli really felt like a winner. The rest of us kind of felt down on that ladder, just kind of down here.
So what are some of...
So for the pilot study, it was a completely new approach for me. Cooperative learning was a new idea, even though the martial art of judo, its founder, Jigaro Kano, really founded and developed judo around a cooperative learning philosophy. But for some reason, I just never understood the application of that. I never understood what it was to apply what Jigaro was really trying to tell his students in the philosophy of judo. And for the first time, this was a new approach for me during the pilot study. There was one thing I really needed, and that was the parents' cooperation. I needed to be in constant contact with the parents, either by phone or through email, and they had to agree to be a part of this new approach and to be a part of this study. I could not have done this without the help of the parents. Why? Because I created a daily exercise program that the students were going to work at, and it would be a part of their life every day. When I first started the pilot study, it was 7 days a week. I had this exercise program that we created, and it was a part of their life every day of every week. Then after the pilot study got rolling, I decided to make some adjustments, and their exercise program became a Monday through Friday before school activity. And Saturday and Sunday, they could rest and relax. So I created a daily exercise program for them. Research tells us how effective exercise is in the aspect of learning. How much of a better learner you will become if you're physically active. And if you can get your students to become physically active, even during the day, get them up out of their chairs, get them moving around different periods. Don't have them sitting in a chair for a long extended period, because it doesn't really develop the necessary things and the way their brain functions when it comes to learning. Exercise and movement is really important, and I don't need to prove that, because when it comes to the martial arts, we can see that that is indeed true on a daily basis. And we chose to focus on the home and the school and the dojo. Now for the pilot study, I really emphasized the dojo and I emphasized home. It wasn't until the second year of the program that the school aspect of this study really became important. But what I did is, on a daily basis and on a monthly basis, each student had a calendar. This happens to be Eli. This was from February of 2014. Every day they did their exercises before school. They were required to do 25 sit-ups, 25 push-ups, 25 jumping jacks, and then they had to run a half a mile. They had to make their bed every day before school, and they were required to keep their bedroom clean. That was their daily regimen, Monday through Friday before school. And if they did that, they would put a line through that particular day, and then at the end of the month, their parents would sign it, and they would bring it to me the first of every month and show me that they had completed their exercises for the month. And one thing I really learned in Zen philosophy, they have a saying that knowing is not enough, we must apply. And that willing is not enough, we must do. And I was sharing with you earlier that Jigoro Kano's philosophy for the martial art of judo really does emphasize cooperative learning, collaboration, working together to make one another be the best that we can be. And that really is his philosophy, and that really is his determining, motivating factor for the art of judo. And I knew that. But prior to my pilot study last year, I never applied that. I knew it, but I never applied it. And this Zen philosophy really hit home to me and really drove hard when I started this master's program, and I discovered that, there's a lot of things that I know, but I don't apply them. And there's a lot of things that I would willingly like to do, but I don't do them. So this was an eye-opener for me. The program really helped me see that application is really important. The program really helped me see that I had the knowledge, but I didn't have the application of that knowledge. The founding principles of judo really are all about cooperative learning and making one another better, working together to make one another better. Cooperation is needed in all aspects of learning, and we must help to make one another better. The first year after we completed the first year, the pilot study, we saw revolutionary changes in all 4 of these students. Evan was really having difficulty in school. Thomas was having difficulty in school. Along with their calendar, I collected their report cards on a semester basis or on a trimester basis, and their parents gave me permission to use their report cards in this study. And I wanted to see how this daily exercise routine and how this cooperative learning method in the dojo, how it really affected them at school and at home. Evan, prior to our pilot study, had a lot of N's on his report cards. And N's always designated that they really needed improvement. And he got a lot of unsatisfactory marks on his report card. After the first year of our pilot study, that all changed for Evan.
Changes you see in your life?
I see a lot of improvements in social activities and school, grades, because before the program I have only 1 or 2 E's when I was in 4th grade and 3rd, I'd still get only 1 or 2 E's, and then now that I'm in 6th grade, I'm getting A's and B's practically.
Mm-hmm. I noticed on your report card you had a lot of unsatisfactory marks. You had did not meet expectations. What did the N's stand for? Needs improvement. You had a lot of those on your report card. But after we finished the year last year with the pilot study, all of those N's and unsatisfactories were gone. You made improvement in all your areas, academically and school. Were you excited about that?
A little bit.
A little bit?
This is Evan, here on the left, when much earlier. He's in 6th grade now, and really struggled in school. Ethan has always struggled in school, and still does, but with the results of the new program, we're really seeing some important improvements in his life also. And this is Ethan's perspective on the new program.
I've noticed a really big improvement in the dojo. Your attitude, your focus, your concentration, your technique. You have really improved in this new cooperative program. What do you think?
I totally agree with that. In the old program, I'd always, the 11 would throw me out or something in a shark pit. I'd usually come over here, sit against the wall, and not participate. I'd go home and I'd like yell at him for technically just being a better fighter.
Mm-hmm. Now, I remember many nights in the old competitive program when you would sit against the wall and just choose not to participate anymore because you were very frustrated at losing all the time.
Now, when we do it now, he throws me, I'll get up, I'll wait, and I'll do it again.
And then all of you are working together much more effectively.
Yeah.
You help one another and you cooperate with one another versus sitting out and either crying or being frustrated and refusing to participate.
Mm-hmm. The only time that really happens is like when somebody gets poked in the eye or...
Right. So that's a big improvement.
This year was our 2nd year in the cooperative learning. After our pilot study focus, the 2nd year became much more intense. Now we really drove home the importance of how does this change us as students in school, at home, and in the dojo. And our expectations became much higher during this 2nd year of our study. And really, I cannot emphasize enough the change in these kids, moving from a cooperative learning method, moving to a cooperative learning method from a competitive method. They work together so well. There's no name calling. There's no self-esteem issues. Nobody ever feels like they can't do it. They all have within them the thought that I can accomplish this, I can do this, I can be a winner, I can earn that excellence and trophy at the end of the year. And when they discovered that they could do that, their Budo, their character, their truth, their honesty, their responsibility, their discipline, their diligence became so much clearer than ever before. And it has been a really positive experience. And it's a joy to see the kids working together. It's a joy to see them helping one another. In the old competitive program, they felt like they couldn't help one another because if they did help one another, somebody else might win and they may lose. And it was a very, very, very positive experience for all of us. Parents, grandparents, everybody involved. This is Brian's perspective on the new cooperative learning.
This newer program, I see more of a cooperation between all of them, and to me, they're like giving their all pretty much every week, and nobody feels like, well, you know, I'm losing, I'm never going to be able to win. My understanding with this program, they all have a chance to win. They all get a chance to get a trophy, and they don't have to ever really worry that, hey, I'm out of running, I'm just going to give up. So I think it's more of a confidence booster. They definitely seem to be working together better, and if I were to have my choice between two programs, I would definitely go with the new program because they always got a chance and they don't have to worry about giving up on anything.
And he's absolutely right. They don't give up on anything, and they feel and they know that they always do have that chance. And that's a real important aspect of cooperative learning. The only way they can lose is if they choose not to do it. If they choose for themselves. They don't have to beat anyone, and the only person they have to beat is really themselves. And when they discover that they don't have to be competitive with anybody other than themselves, that makes them a real winner. This is Thomas, and Thomas struggled in school with the ends. He needed improvement in so many academic areas. He struggled at home because he was always talking back to his parents, Todd and Kathy, who you met earlier. And Thomas had a lot of struggles going on in his life, and this program somewhat revolutionized him. And one of the reasons was because when he was coming to practice now, when he was coming to the dojo, other students didn't make fun of him. There wasn't any name calling, and nobody really picking on him. They were all working together to make one another better. And this is Thomas's perspective.
But like the new program, it's good because like in the mornings you get to exercise and like it actually wakes you up before like when you get into class, so then you're not so tired and you're like on top of everything and you're just not like, I don't know, just out of it. You're into it.
Your focus and your concentration?
Really focused.
You're really focused.
Yes.
I like that.
Because like it just especially now since it's winter and it's kind of colder on your face, it wakes me up right. So I'm right in the morning since some of the times I don't want to, but I do get up, and then that just helps me like cooperate and stuff in the mornings and throughout the day.
Good.
And, yeah, so the program's going good, and it's actually helping like schoolwork and all that, because it's like before I was getting like N's and S's at a factory, needs improvement and all that. Now I'm getting like C's and B's, so that's improved.
The research. These are some of the educational experts in cooperative learning that I studied, and I read their works, and I read their studies that they've done in cooperative learning. Of course, John Dewey is at the top of the list, and he has a lot of perspective when it comes to the classroom and to life in general. And I think John Dewey is one of the reasons my study carried way beyond the classroom and into home life and into life in general, because John Dewey had such an impact on me. And then Ming Chu was a professor of learning and instruction at the University of Buffalo in New York, and she had some really fine writings in American Educational Journal. Robert Selvin, wonderful study in cooperative learning. He's in educational psychology. He is in educational psychology at Johns Hopkins. Elizabeth Cohen is well known from the New York Teachers College, and she also taught at Stanford. Just a wonderful work that she's done in the area of cooperative learning. And then these two brothers from Israel, Yale, Sharon, and his brother Shalom. Yale was the coordinator of teacher training at the University of Tel Aviv, and his brother was the professor of educational psychology. Just a great study on cooperative learning, the benefits of cooperative learning, and all the benefits of students working together in the classroom. They did a marvelous, marvelous study. And Susan Cain is an author. She's a professor at Harvard and at Princeton Law Schools. I just ran across her book, stumbling through a bookstore in Eau Claire, Wisconsin one afternoon, and her book is called Quiet. And she has a wonderful perspective on classroom learning and how students perform in the classroom. And she brought to my attention that some students don't have a strength in working with others. Some students, their strength is really working alone and working by themselves, and they prefer to learn in that way. So from her perspective, I had to bring in a whole new aspect of, well, how do you get all students to function in a cooperative learning classroom if their strength isn't working with others? And how you can interact and get everybody supporting and helping one another. So that was an interesting find. The research really states, and this is the results of the research, Slavin really reported on the importance of working together, depend on one another's skills and resources to learn, and how he incorporated that into his classroom. And it's the fact that everyone is learning together and everyone is sharing information together. Liz Cohen really emphasized that everyone succeeds when the group succeeds. If the group is successful, everyone is successful. And that was the basis of her study. And then Min Ming Chen really focused on how our role as a teacher is a guide and a facilitator. And we're really there to guide our students along and to facilitate all of the discussion and learning and all of the richness that is going on in the classroom. And then, as I mentioned earlier, John Dewey really impacted me because he believes, and his writings really emphasize the fact that what you learn in the classroom should carry with you into all of life. Your classroom should be engaging and not just desk sitting. And this is the result. This is the competitive approach, and the negatives far outweigh the positives. In the competitive approach, I really discovered that winning is the only important thing. Win, no matter what the cost, no matter who you have to hurt, no matter who you have to run over, winning is the only thing that really matters. Letter grades become very important, awards, and the emphasis on these become the focus of the classroom. And in this situation, you always have losers. Always. And in the life of those losers, their self-esteem is always affected. They feel like they can never win. Like Brian, the grandfather, mentioned earlier in the presentation, some of his grandsons said, "Why even try?" Learning becomes impaired. Whereas what I've learned in the last 2 years with this cooperative approach, that the positives far outweigh the negatives. Winning is still important. Don't get me wrong. Competition is still important. But we learn together how to win, and we learn together how to be successful through cooperation, learning together, helping yourself and others, developing the attitude that you can be successful. It builds your self-esteem. Trying really matters, and learning is never impaired. I loved it. I loved the whole experience and everything that went on with that experience.
But with the new program, he is more confident. You know, he doesn't feel as upset about it. I mean, he likes to come here now. I do see it carrying out through wrestling, because he struggles with kids that won't let him when they're learning the techniques. Because at wrestling, they're still competitive, no matter what. So kids don't slow down and let you learn the technique as easy as like now here. They do have to do that. Where at wrestling, that's not there. So I always remind him when he's teaching, working on technique with another kid, do it just like you do at judo. So he's a good partner. His other one. So I see it carrying out in his other sports too. I see it at home.
I mean, you've seen a big change in him since the new part has kicked in.
Really?
Oh God, yeah. It was just like one day, just the next day it was like, wow, you know, what happened? You know, and it was all from that talk, basically, you know, ever since then things been working out for him better. They don't fight us to come here, you know, so it seems like
If
he
I don't wake
enjoys
him
it
up
now.
early enough, he tells me I have to wake him up earlier.
This is Matt's perspective on how the new program went.
But ever since we swapped to the new program, there's been a lot of improvement, whether it be, you know, at home, with the respect aspect, their homework, they do their homework. As soon as they get home, they love checking off that calendar every morning, and they'll be like, Dad, I did, you know, 5 extra push-ups. Dad, I did this, or I did this, or I did 3 extra laps. It just seems like instead of competing with someone that is more athletic and they might not be able to be right now because of their physical nature or their, you know, they're only competing with themselves. And I think it instills a much better feeling in them. You know, they just have a better sense of fulfillment. And it's definitely made my life easier since I've been home from deployment with the boys, because they help with their chores, and you know they help make dinner. Granted, yeah, some they're doing their homework every night. You know, I see them. They check their lists, and they do everything, whether they turn in their homework or not. You know, that's something beyond my control as a parent. But it's just, I just really like the new program. And, you know, last year after the award ceremony, just seeing all 4 of the kids walk away as winners versus just one, I think really helped the next year come along and flow so much better.
So the results of the study, the competitive approach, as you can see, has a lot of negatives. 1 winner, a lot of losers. Self-esteem, many students felt as if they were never good enough. Why even try? Name calling and the teasing, not participating, sitting out, negative attitudes, not having respect for one another, and sometimes not having respect for me as a teacher. Home and school, some real problems, a lot of ends, needs improvement, unsatisfactory grades. Those were all issues, and how all of that changed with the cooperative approach. They discovered all can be winners because they're competing against themselves. Their self-esteem and their self-worth really, really improved. Trying did really matter. They were working together. The name calling and the teasing was not an issue. Not participating and sitting out, that was no longer an issue. They had respect for one another, positive changes there. A lot of changes at home and at school, observable by the parents and by me. Cooperative learning was really, really an important aspect to helping one another do the best that we can do. And that was really the results of my study. So for me, it was really, really a successful, a positive experience. And I plan on continuing with the cooperative method in all aspects of the martial arts, because I see a lot of positive changes. Thanks for coming.
All right.
Yeah.